All right, welcome back. This is part 2 of the intermediate section of automating emails in Airtable. This is Chris from OptimizeIS, and in this part, we're going to look at how to build time zone aware triggers for your email templates. I'm going to show you how to achieve this in Airtable using an automation and a few formula fields. Let's dive in and have a look. All right, so let's get into it. One of the things that you're going to need right off the bat is a time zone field for each person in the people table. So I have a time zone field, and that's a single select in my case. So Airtable recognizes set values for this. So if you go to Airtable support, you can see a list of all the supported time zone identifiers that they accept for this. So, and then that's how you can choose which values you want to put into your base based on where your people are. So like if I'm looking at Sophia here, she's in Kiev, Jordan is in New York, Emily is in London. So all these people have different time zones. In order to properly schedule emails, we're going to have to consider the recipient's time zone. So let's go ahead and pull that in. So I'm going to roll up the recipient time zone from the recipient people record. There we go. So we have that now rolled up. Another thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to add a new status here. So this one is going to be called scheduled. I'm going to make that orange and I'm going to move it up to the top so that it's easier to select. So I'm going to go ahead and just schedule this one right here so that we can use it down the line in testing. We're also going to add a send date field. So that'll be a date attribute. I'm going to call it send date. We're not going to include a time. And then for the time, we're going to use a single select field. And I'm going to call that send time. And I'm just going to add all the possible times that we would want to select here. So I've gone ahead and added all those, as you can see. So let's go ahead and select for this test 1 p.m. because it's about 1 p.m. here. And by the time we test this, it will already be 1 p.m. in my time zone. And then for the send date, we're going to go ahead and go with today. Then I'm going to want to combine these two things. So I'm going to make a formula and I'm going to call this send date time. And this is going to create a send date time object. So this is just a formula that brings those two things together. So go ahead and pause right now and make sure that you get that in there as well. And then you can see that due to the fact that we don't have a send date or a send time for these previous ones, it errors. So one thing you can do there is you can just add an if send date at the beginning, close that out, so it will no longer error if you do not have a send date. And then you can do the same thing with send time as well. Then we're going to want to create an offset from GMT field. This is going to be a formula as well. And this is a pretty big one. Don't get overwhelmed. We don't need to go into the specifics of exactly how this works. So go ahead and pause and make sure that you bring this in. Essentially what this is doing is it's considering the recipient's time zone and it's figuring out how many hours away from GMT is it. So, is it 2 hours ahead of GMT? Is it 3 hours behind it? Or maybe it is GMT already, so the value that it returns would be 0. So let's have a look. So in Sophia's particular case, she's located in Kiev. So it's telling me right now that Kiev is 2 hours ahead of GMT. If I were to go over to the people record and update Sophia's time zone to Dublin, which is where I'm based right now, which is actually currently set to GMT. If I go back to email logs, you'll see that it's now 0. And then if we were to put Sophia in LA, all of a sudden she's 7 hours behind GMT. So I'll go ahead and put her back in Dublin because I'm using this record to test right now, and that's where I am. So then we're going to want to create another formula field. Lots of formulas in this one. And this is going to be the actual GMT time of sending. So go ahead and pause and make sure that you get that in as well. And what this is doing is it's telling me what is the time in GMT that the system should send the email in order for it to send at the right time in the recipient's time zone. So for example, if we say that we need to send it at 1 p.m., and let's put Sophia back in Kiev for a second. So that's a 2-hour offset. So Sophia's time zone is 2 hours ahead of GMT. So that means that in order to send at 1, we would have to send at 11 a.m. in GMT. So that's how that works. But of course, since Sophia is going to be based in Dublin for this test, it'll say that we need to send it at 1 because, again, Dublin is in GMT. And then the final formula field that we're going to need is a field called GMT Time Code. All this is doing is it's formatting the actual GMT time of sending according to this format right here, which is the year, month, day, and then the hour. So you'll see in this case, we have the year, the month, the day, and then the hour, which is 13 because we're sending this at 1 p.m. And this is in GMT, of course. So this is something that I do because it makes it easier when we're running the automation to understand which records are currently in the scope of sending. So we'll look at that in a second. So what was all this for? Well, so I'm going to show you. Now let's go into automations and we're going to create another automation. This is going to be called send scheduled emails. So we're going to say at a scheduled time. The interval is going to be hour and we're going to say every 1 hour. Test trigger. Now let's go and we're going to add another step and this is going to be a script. So this is the script right here. So what this is doing is it's taking whatever the current time is at the time of triggering, and it's outputting the current GMT time code in that same format that we created in the formula earlier. So go ahead and write that in as well. And once you're done with that, additionally, we're going to add an input variable here, which is specified up here. It's called trigger time. And you're going to want to select the actual trigger time from the add a scheduled time step. So let's go ahead and test that. So this is going to output the current GMT time code at the time of running this script, which is 2026, 3/28, 13, which is 1 p.m. We're going to finish editing. Now, all that we have to do is we have to search for records in the email logs that are scheduled that have that value as their GMT time code. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to find records. The table that we're going to be searching is email logs. We're going to find records based on a condition, and the condition is going to be where status is scheduled. And let's say where recipient is not empty, just as sort of a guardrail. We're also going to say where template is not empty as well as another guardrail. And then we're going to say where the GMT time code is, and then we're going to hit this cog over here and we're going to select dynamic, and we're going to go to the output of the run a script step, which is called GMT time code, and we're going to select that. So we're looking for any record that has a recipient, has a template, the status is scheduled, and the GMT time code value of that record is the current GMT time code. Let's test the action. When we test the action, we see the email log that we created for testing that is scheduled with template B with the recipient Sophia for 13 in the recipient's time zone. The recipient's time zone is Dublin. Great. And it'll find, however many records meet that criteria. So if we go back to data and we add a few more here, we can schedule, template A, template C as well. And let's send to some of these other people that are in Dublin. So we'll do one to Lucas, we'll do one to Logan, and we'll say 13 on the 28th, which is today. Go back to automations. Let's test this find record step here. And now it's going to show me all three. Then what we do in the next step, so we found those records. Now we want to loop through them. So we're going to do a repeating group. The list that we're going to repeat over is the output of the find record step. So we're going to use that as the list. Let's test the input list. We're going to see that we have those 3 records here to test with. So then we're going to add an action, and the action is just simply going to be update record. So what we're going to do is we're going to select email logs as the table that we're updating. And then for the record ID, we're going to select the current item's record ID. The fields that we're going to update is simply going to be status, and we're going to set that status to send. And that's it. Everything else is controlled in the send email automation that we made in the previous tutorial. Let's go ahead and run that right now. So let's run the full thing and see if it works. So I'm going to test the trigger. I'm going to run the script. So right now it's only 1:15. So the output is still going to be the current GMT time code. So 2026, 3/28, 13, which is 1 p.m. We're going to find those records. So let's test that action. There we go. We're going to test the input list again. and then we're going to generate a preview. So we see that if this would have run, it would have set the status to send. Everything else remains the same. Most of these fields are computed. So before I run it as configured, one of the things that I'll do is I'll just update all of the recipient emails to mine just for the sake of testing here. So now I'll go back to automations and I'll run as configured. There we go. So it's sent to my email. There we go. So this is working as expected. I'm going to arm it. And now you have the ability to schedule emails. So I can go ahead and create a new record, select scheduled, select any one of my templates, select an individual, the send date that I want it sent, and the time, and then once that time arrives, it will send, no problem. So this might seem a little bit manual, but of course there are an infinite amount of ways that you can automatically queue these up using rules. So for example, let's say that your people records have a start date. So what you can do is you can have an automation. So create an automation. And then whenever a record is created in people, if you have your Airtable synced with your HR system like Workday or Greenhouse or something like that, you can have your people sync right into Airtable. Whenever that happens, you can have an automation like this that triggers when a record is created in the people table. So we'll go ahead and choose Sophia as an example. And then what you can do is you can create a record as soon as that happens. And this can be, her onboarding emails, for example. So let's say, we have, let's say the template F is actually welcome email. And the subject line is a welcome to the company. And then, we can have standard hi first name, welcome. We're happy to have you here. You can add any other, information or attributes. The sky's really the limit. I mean, you can bring in any attributes you want. You could bring in information that's specific to the person's department, specific to the role, using the technique that I showed you in the previous tutorial. Anyway, so we have that welcome email. So we go back to the automation that we just created that I'm going to call new person equals trigger onboarding emails. And that first one is going to be created in the email logs table. We're going to choose the field that we're going to update. So we're going to say status is scheduled. The email template that we are adding is going to be welcome email. We're going to have the send date be the start date of the individual. So that's going to be dynamic. And then I'm going to pull in the start date. Then I'm going to have the send time be, let's say we want this to send at 9 a.m. in the target recipient's time zone. So I'll just select 9. And of course, this will queue this up in the system and it will make sure that it's sent on the person's start date at 9. So, this is just kind of one step in this automation, but you could have several other create record steps that queue up emails in the system for their onboarding. Right? So you could have like one send on day 1 on the start date, another one send 2 days later. So you essentially just add 2 days to the start date and make that the date that you populate in the message log. So, lots of possibilities here. Let's just go ahead and run this just so you can see. So before we run that, if we look at Sophia's start date, so right now it's set to the past. So I'll just update this to like Monday the 30th. And then one other field before we run it that we forgot to add is the recipient. So of course we want the recipient to be the record that was triggered here. So when a record is created in people, we select the Airtable record ID of that record. And then we will run it as configured. And now if we go over, so we see that we have this message queued up to Sophia, and this is now scheduled and queued up, and we'll send at that time in her time zone. So this is pretty cool stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do leveraging this. You can automate internal emails. You could automate external emails. The sky's the limit. Very exciting. So we've, thus far we've sort of been using Airtable's native send function, which is awesome, right? But the only limitation there is that you can't really do much with HTML. So what if we wanted to send like beautiful dynamic HTML emails through these automations? You can, and I'm going to show you how to do it in the next tutorial. See you there.